Okay, I think it started. All right. Take 400. All right. Well, my name is Jessica Alexander. I work at Tidwell Middle School, as you know. I just wanted to thank you for being here today. And I guess the first question would be, or statement, is just tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right, I am Samantha Harris. I graduated from West Texas A&M University. I am almost complete with my master's from University of North Texas in learning technology. I've taught science in seventh grade middle school, and I've gone and taught at Byron Nelson High School, and I did the Biomedical Science Academy as well as forensic science.
Okay, it sounds like you definitely have the biology background and definitely science and all that. So I guess from there, why did you become a teacher? Why did you want to become a teacher, or how did you decide?
A lot of the influences for me were from my science teachers and things they've done for me, as well as how they've prepared my peers and everything. And when I was in high school, I had a really rough time with some of my peers, and they were going through an experience, and I didn't know how to handle it myself. And I found that I was able to reach out to my teachers, and they were really supportive and made us all feel like we were welcome in our own bodies and things like that. And I want to be that person for somebody else. I want to give to other people and tell them that it's okay to go through a rough time and come back from it.
No, that sounds amazing, and definitely like one of the more positive experiences of teaching and wanting to kind of give back. So specifically then, why do you want to work on the middle school level?
So middle school for me, I was traveling a lot. My parents were in the military, so one time we were in Germany, and then the next thing you know, we're here in Texas, and it was just a very, middle school is that awkward age. Kids are going through a lot of changes hormonally and, socially, emotionally, and physically. And for me, the military and transferring in the middle of middle school just made it even more awkward. And I know the experiences that I had were rough. I didn't know how to feel good about myself. And I found that, going back to why I became a teacher in general, I think that I could make a positive influence on a lot of students, more so in middle school than any other grade level, because it is that awkward time frame. You do need guidance and you need support and get through the weird, awkward phases.
No, I mean, you kind of nailed middle school down, especially middle schoolers. Yes. What kind of tied into that then? What would you consider your educational philosophy, or kind of how you view your educational philosophy?
So I think a lot of teaching comes down to the environment and the kind of relationships that you build with students, making sure that they're supportive for their growth, yet it's not too easy, but it's a challenging environment that you build. And as far as my philosophy, I do think students need a more hands-on experience, which is easy in science because normally you think science, you think labs, you think hands-on. But there are other ways to make just about any subject hands-on and more student-centered than teacher-centered. And then so instead of giving a lecture an entire class period, I would much rather the students do the work and learn through the process of doing rather than the process of hearing and sitting.
So if you walked me through what you believe would be a lesson, just a regular everyday today lesson from start to finish, what do you think, or what do you feel like a lesson would look like in your own classroom?
Yeah.
You were at the middle school.
So one of the best things that I found when I was doing seventh grade science was having them come in and have a bell ringer up on the board. And I always set a timer. So the moment the bell rings, the timer begins, and it's up on the board next to the bell ringer. So they know, okay, you have 2 minutes and 30 seconds left. If you have a minute left, and kind of keeps them on pace of, it's no longer social. It's not a passing period anymore. We are in the class. It's time to work. And then after that bell ringer, I kind of have a teaching moment for about 5 to 7 minutes. So we're 10 minutes into class by the end of the teaching moment. Where it's direct teach, I'm telling them information, confirming they understood the bell ringer or the warm-up session, and then we jump right into an activity where they are doing. So after I've kind of explained, we gone over some misconceptions, they will have an action. If it's writing a summary, creating a interactive note page or anything like that, something to make them think. And then towards the end of class, anywhere 5 minutes, I want to wrap it up and make sure whatever activity they were working on. So if they were working on a summary, I would give an opportunity for a student to explain their summary they created. Or if everyone is kind of all over the place, that would be a great moment to kind of redirect. This is what you should have gotten. If that's not what you have, let's go ahead and make notes and we'll kind of address it the next day.
Kind of like a catch, like catching students before.
Yeah, catching them before they leave, and then whatever they misunderstood is solidified.
Perfect. So then, to tie in with that, how would you build, I guess, a positive classroom environment? So I know you had your past experience with middle school and your teachers creating that environment of acceptance. So how would you yourself create one in the science middle school classroom?
Yeah. And I think it really depends on the students and getting to know them. So the first week of school, I like to do get to know you activities. I like them talking to each other, but also talking to me. So I've done an icebreaker where we get in 2 rows and we have a set amount of questions and they're printed off. And so I have pre-planned whatever they're going to ask each other. Normally it's what's your favorite subject and the boring ones, but then I do like to kind of go a little deeper and share something about you or come up with 2 truths and a lie. And they kind of like those 2 because it gives them a moment of freedom to choose what they're going to share and how comfortable they are. But then in those 2 rows, we have a set timer. You ask the questions that you feel most comfortable with, and then you kind of, person on the end gets up and they rotate, and I'm in the rows with them. So we're going through, and if we need a group of 3, we have a group of 3. But from there, we kind of get a foundation. Everyone gets their awkwardness out. And then I do like to introduce myself with some personal stories of, I've traveled around. Here's what happened to me in middle school. I like to show a picture, and 7th grade science is really the one that stood out to me because that's the one when you dissect a frog. So I have a picture of myself dissecting a frog, and I like to show them that and say, here's where I was when I was in your shoes. And from there, a lot of kids open up because they're like, wow, she also was grossed out by frogs, or she thought they were so cool, and I relate to that. So I try and find something that will pique their interest and hold on to that for the rest of the semester with them.
No, that sounds amazing, especially the connection of here's what I was like at your age, and here's what I went through at your age, and here's what I like at your age.
It really does open them up because they see you as a person, and they see, oh, you had a rough time, or oh, you were bullied, or oh, you were super popular, that kind of thing. It just kind of makes them feel not so left out. It ties them back to reality.
Mm-hmm. No, it's kind of amazing to be able to make those positive relationships by getting almost like on their level while creating that positive. So I guess going into the nitty-gritty of teaching, with data, we have Edugence, and that's a system we use to record data from our summative assignments, also data from our district data, data from STAR tests, previously done CDAs, which is our curriculum-based assessments, and other data. So how could you potentially use some of this data, even whether it's from science or even other subjects? How do you feel like you can use this data to help students that could be in your classroom?
So if we're looking at the data from previous years, so if they say it's an 8th grade classroom that I'm assigned and we're looking at the 7th grade, then I can kind of pick up the TEKS where students are falling behind or the general standards that they struggled with in 7th grade. So when I look at them in 8th grade and in my classroom, I know, oh, we're really bad at energy pyramids. We should probably kind of have a little bit of review before we jump into the 8th grade material. And then kind of taking that a step further, if we look at the 8th grade data of what the information that normal 8th graders are the typically missed kind of questions, I know, oh, this is something, regardless of how they were before, every year they seem to be struggling with photosynthesis or something like that, then I know this is something that we should make into a drawing or a picture, or have them tell a story to each other or teach each other and get into a higher level of understanding before we get to the end of the semester and it's like, all right, let's try and learn it all.
No, I mean, and I could definitely see the thinking behind that of using the data to potentially kind of catch students where they are rather than hitting them at the very end.
Exactly.
No. And so with data, we, especially our district, our goal is to always promote literacy no matter what subject. So it's not just English and language arts that we promote our literacy, but it's every subject, trying to tie it in, practicing with students with literacy. So how would you potentially support these goals in a classroom?
I think literacy, especially nowadays, I feel like a lot of people get overwhelmed with sending text messages to each other and using improper grammar, and a lot of students don't know how to write. And in science, it's simple with CER, so the claim, evidence, and reasoning, and kind of structuring it from there. And I like to put sentence stems for my strugglers who aren't really at par. They don't know where to start. They don't know where to begin, or maybe they're an English language learner. They have something to tie them to the thought of, oh, this is what a claim is supposed to look like, or here's where I talk about my evidence and this happens because, and everything like that. I also like to do at the end of a lesson, almost like Cornell notes, where they have a moment to summarize whatever it was we were talking about that day. And I require those to be in complete sentences to try and encourage, proper grammar back in the classroom instead of the shorthand, or when you take notes, you tend to go really fast. And yes, it is writing, but when we're talking about literacy and trying to improve reading and writing, a proper sentence never really hurt anyone.
Yes. I understand where you're coming from for sure. And I guess on the topic of Cornell Notes, so what's maybe an example of setting up students on Cornell Notes, whether they might be familiar with some of it or some of our students may have never used Cornell Notes before your classroom?
Yeah, so, and that kind of goes in with the first week or 2 weeks as far as setting up the classroom procedures. I do have anchor charts that I like to use that show exactly how a Cornell should be broken down and what you put in the notes section, or where you put your questions, your summary, where your essential questions should be labeled. And so there's the anchor charts, but then also in the first few weeks of setting up the classroom, we would go through some practice. And I like to use it's about me kind of thing, because we're still getting to know each other. And so they'll make a Cornell note about themselves, and then they can have, what questions would you ask, or what questions could somebody ask about you that you haven't yet filled out in your notes. And then they kind of write a brief summary about themselves. And it's easy. And I picked the about you because they know themselves. It's easier to look at that and use that as a foundation, and then jump into the notes and actually apply it.
Mm-hmm. So kind of like setting it up as everyone does it at the very beginning of the year.
Yeah.
Let's do it personalized and then add the content in. All right. So with your master's, I know it's in technology. How would you integrate technology into the middle school classroom?
Yeah, it really depends on the lesson. So I've tried a couple times with interactive notebooks that are virtual, and then I've tried interactive notebooks that are handheld, and I like to give students the option. And I've actually in my undergrad, I did an internship where I was for an entire semester. We looked at data, I did research, I created digital notebooks, and we applied them in the classroom. And we saw that students who really struggled with vocabulary and trying to keep up, especially in science, because there are so many different terms you've never heard outside of the science classroom, they excelled, and my kids with dyslexia especially excelled by using the virtual notes. And it's still set up the exact same way. They take their Cornell, it's the same format, you still have to do your summary, and you still get notebook checks and everything. But I think that having a moment to read it out, and yes, the computer does tell them when they mistype anything, but a lot of kids are faster and they're more familiar with it. So keeping it in that format, I found that my strugglers were able to test higher. And then if I let them choose to handwrite their notes, the ones that are comfortable with that, you know, they make them pretty. It's awesome. And one of the reasons I went towards that way is because some students, they hate, okay, why do I have to glue it in? Why does it have to have the structure? And I understand it. Maybe they should have some freedom. And so I try and give them that between, okay, virtual or paper. And then if they're misusing it, obviously, you know, at the beginning of the year when we go through a contract and everything with parents, it's, well, if you misuse it, you lose it and there's no getting it back kind of thing.
No, that's perfect. So what was, I guess, with understanding kind of where students are coming from and changing the way maybe a classroom is run, going on to that, so what is the best feedback that you've received? And then why? Like what made that something that you consider as the best feedback that you've received that you can go off of?
I think the best feedback I received would be from one of my past students. They told me that they really could not learn in an environment that was crazy. And for the most part, so that in this particular class, we had a lot of different opinionated students, and they definitely clashed with each other. So trying to come up with a seating chart was one thing among trying to teach the content and keep everyone at ease. And so when the student came to me very concerned that they weren't getting the best learning experience, it had me take a moment of, okay, what's going on in this classroom? What is causing these outbursts or disruptive behaviors that are going on? And I discovered that some of the students really just needed to work on building a relationship and having an SEL moment with me, but also having time with a peer to just vent and let all of their stress from that day go away. And the moment that I found the disruptors and kind of paired them up and said, all right, you have 2 minutes, start of class, starts now, go talk about whatever you need to talk about. So when you come back in the classroom, it's nothing but science. And from there, like the entire atmosphere of the whole class just completely flipped. And I saw, and the student did come back and was like, I don't know what you did, but this is so much better. Like, I feel like we're having fun and it's not always someone's getting in trouble and it's not taking away from the learning.
So I guess on that same topic, how do you handle a student who is consistently disruptive? I mean, day to day or on and off, but consistent?
Yeah, I think it does come back to knowing the students and building those relationships. And there are some students where they really are closed off. They don't want to learn. They don't want to sit with you. They're no interest in a relationship. I am active in communicating with parents. So the moment something happens, I have kind of like a strike system. The first time we'll have a private conversation. The second time an email will get sent home. And then the third time, if it gets to that point, it'll be a detention. And then it just slowly escalates from there. And after so many detentions, maybe it's a referral or an eco. And I really hate getting to that point because the moment I send the student out of the room, I lose their trust. I lose kind of that moment that we can go back and build a relationship. So I do try and take some time during their independent work to sit down with the student and say, hey, what are you reading right now? What are you watching? And I try and find something that they are interested in. And then when a disruptive behavior kind of occurs and the moment's over and they cool down, I can kind of ask and reflect. And I do go and watch some of the shows they suggest. I want to have something to talk about with them, if anything, to distract them or make them more appreciative, maybe make them look forward to coming to the class. And through that and building that relationship with them, I found that it does help save kind of the relationship, but also the classroom environment.
So, what does communication with parents on that level look like?
Yeah, so communication with parents, it kind of varies. I do like to, even after just a one-on-one talk with the student, I do like to send an email home. Hey, just so you know, here's what happened. We talked about it. We came to this conclusion. And that would just be a simple email because it's nothing escalating. There's no detention or anything like that in the future. But then if it was to happen again, it would be a phone call so that I could try and get a hold of a parent. And anytime a parent doesn't answer the phone call, I follow up with an email just in case they don't hear my voicemail or anything like that. And sometimes I don't hear back from them, but at least, I've called, I've emailed, and come again. Well, I'll call and email again. And if it needs to get to that point where maybe somebody else who's been able to contact the parents gives them a call, if it's another coworker, or if we have to go to counseling, whatever we need, I tend to try it. I just want to be really thorough and document if an incident is happening. I've tried calling, I've tried emailing, here's what. And it's not just an email, because parents do get a lot of emails. Their kids have 8 teachers. Say they have 5 kids, they're getting 40 different teachers that can be emailing them. And it's a lot. So I try and not rely on the email and do a phone call when possible.
So, going back to within a classroom and teaching students, especially middle school, and even the science classroom, what teaching strategies do you prefer to use in the classroom?
Ooh, that is a good question. So strategies in specific that I like to use. You always hear the generic scaffolding, trying to find ways to reach all students, and differentiation. I do like this. I have a lot of conversations, and I like my students talking about science because, writing it down, thinking about it in the moment is easy for some people, but to actually go back and discuss it can be difficult. So I do a think, pair, share, where students think about it on their own and they come to a conclusion from a question. They share with a buddy and they kind of critique and take notes, add on to whatever was being said from each other. And then from the pairing part, they get either then share with another pair, or we share out as a whole class. And if we do the whole class sharing out, we kind of have a moment where, oh, whoa, we're all on different pages. What's going on? Let's try and figure it out. And I do find a lot of kids in the share or in the pair moment correcting each other. And they're like, oh, wait, no, before you say that to the whole class, let's fix it. And so it kind of gives them that moment of, it's okay to be wrong. You can learn from it. And let's teach you before you share to the whole class, which could be embarrassing or kind of intimidating for some. So when they have that moment to talk with a partner, it really eases their stress and all the jitters that come with it.
So earlier you talked about SEL, and I know with the current climate that we have, a lot of our students, we both have remote and in person, and teachers are teaching either both or they're focused on one or the other, but they're still working together on both.
Yeah.
So what does SEL or even building positive relationships with students in both levels look inside of your classroom? Or
yeah, and I know sometimes it does feel like between remote people and in class, like there's a divide. And so it depends on the structure of the classes. I have some where they do Zoom in, or I've had some where they Zoom in the moment with the kids who are currently in class, in which case I got a webcam so that they can see the people who are in class and they actually unmute themselves and talk with their peers instead of talking just to me. So I try and give them a moment to socialize with each other. If it was a class where we don't Zoom in and maybe there's a Zoom period, that's where it becomes really hard. I do like to try, say I have 10 kids in that Zoom, perfect. There's multiple of them. I can create 5 breakout rooms and maybe they're in pairs, or I sometimes do like to do 2 breakout rooms. So there are 5 of them. So if one person doesn't want to talk, they can have a moment to just listen and take, and just sometimes hearing from your peers is almost like creating that false sense that you're there with them. And I don't want anyone feeling alone, but I also don't want to pressure or put stress on someone who doesn't know someone. And now here they are in a Zoom randomly together, and now they're forced to talk. So I try and create bigger groups so they have a moment. But past that, if I put them into, 10 kids, 10 different breakout rooms where they're independently working and I hop back and forth, I could have a personal moment with each kid and, hey, how are you doing? With the virtual environments, there's also great collaboration through Google Documents. And so I have a Google Slides where they go and they add something, and then I go back in and add a comment towards it, and they can see that I added like a star on their page, and then I added feedback inside that star. And while it might not be face-to-face and it is asynchronous, they know I'm there, and I hope they can feel that I care.
Perfect. So going then into the background of being a teacher, when you hear the famous words professional development, what do you think of?
When I think of professional development, I think of ways to improve on maybe some of my downfalls. So I know that going back to that crazy class that everything was almost chaotic because of 2 kids, I know sometimes I struggle with identifying the root cause. So if there was a PD on, managing a classroom with all of their different personalities and trying to figure out how to make them blend into a one cohesive environment, that would be something that I would explore. Or, diving deeper into a science. So I like to think I know it all, but I do understand maybe photosynthesis. I go too high at a level, or maybe I'm too low at a level for what a 7th grader should be learning. So just having a moment to collaborate and maybe put myself on the same scale as everyone else is also what I think of as professional development, and just knowing your students and the level they are at, but then also the level they need to be at, especially when we talk about STAR or any CBAs that we're looking at. If I know my students are at, let's say, a level where they can identify that photosynthesis needs water, but they need to be able to identify the products, well, I need to get them to that level. And how do we get them to that level without overwhelming them, I guess?
So on kind of the same topic, what are some areas of personal growth that you have?
Yeah, so areas of personal growth for me would be my classroom management. And I think that just comes from jumping into remote learning and trying to figure out how to handle a live Zoom while also trying to handle an in-class class has been a real thrown into the wind almost. And any tips that could be presented for that, I've looked into a lot of professional teachers that seem to be doing pretty well, and so I ask them, hey, how are you doing? And through my master's in learning technologies, we have a lot of ideas that will bounce off from each other and share. And one of the things that was shared with me was those breakout rooms that I started doing with students, so they had a moment to talk with someone in class while they are virtual, and they kind of pick up on, oh, I didn't realize Miss Harris said that. I must have stepped away to the bathroom or something, and they didn't have a moment to unmute themselves and ask, wait, I'm so lost. But when they have a moment with a peer, oh, that's what was supposed to be going on, and kind of those aha moments that happen.
So then what are your areas that you feel are strengths?
I I like to believe that building relationships with my students is one of my strengths, and just trying to be personable with them. And I do pride myself. The whole reason I came into teaching was to be there for other people, and kind of an open door policy almost. Like if you are going through a tough time, I want to be there for you and guide you and support you in anything that you do. And the best way for me to do that with my students is to build their trust. And that's why I bring in that embarrassing photo of me holding a frog from 7th grade, because they think it's funny. They're like, wow, that's what you look like. And I'm like, yeah, my hair was cut really badly because I tried to give myself bangs, and then I thought it was cool to swoop them in front of my whole face. And some of the kids are like, wow, you look just like me. So building that relationship through a connection of whether I embarrass myself, I make them laugh, those tend to be the ways that I'm more like. It's just my personality, and they seem to respond to that. I do know, like one time I was having a really tough time connecting with a certain class, and so I went to go and sit down and help someone, but I saw another student grab the seat I was about to sit in, but I was already in like full mode to sit down, and I couldn't stop myself. Like my brain knew, my muscles didn't respond, and so I fell straight to the floor, and everyone started cracking up. And it was from that moment on that kids were telling me about their day. They were telling me what they're doing that weekend, what show they're watching, and it was just it was an awkward start, but it was a lot of fun.
So then tell me about a time that you have solved a problem.
Solved a problem. My goodness, I feel like I've talked about a lot of problems I've solved. I think, relating back to technology and integrating that into the classroom, I do run into those, oh, the network's down, their Chromebooks aren't working, and those problems on the fly. I actually had a lab earlier this week that I did with my students on Tuesday, and it was 100% all online. We were outside, and I was like, oh, this will be great. They'll open it up, we can go outside, they'll conduct their lab, they'll record their data online. Well, forgot there was no internet outside of the school. So we got out there and we had nothing to do. So instead we, for my first period at least, because I couldn't just run inside and leave them outside themselves, we did the lab, we experimented, we just didn't record the data. Instead, I had them take pictures on their cell phones, and then they would upload that into their submission. And I just know that was my fault. Like, yes, they measured it. They took a picture of their measurement to the best of their ability. So when they looked back at it, they saw exactly where the marking was or what size. It was a tire lab, so they saw what size a tire was. And thankfully, I had time between first and second to go run down to the copier, print at least enough for second period, and then now I had paper copies and they can just record their data. But it was definitely very nerve-wracking because I was like, how can I plan it all out perfectly except not having internet? It was one of those aw man moments where I just completely forgot everything I was doing.
Yes, classrooms can be very unpredictable. I guess with classrooms, you have the full campus experience. You have actually a lot of opportunities. So what previous opportunities have you taken within your campus, and what could you potentially want to explore in a new campus or our campus?
Yeah, so when you mean opportunities, do you mean advisor and sponsorships and things like that? Or are you talking leadership positions?
Leadership positions, but we also have clubs that we have the potential of teachers volunteering to have student clubs.
Yeah.
Being mentors to others and such like that.
Yeah. So I haven't had the opportunity to have a club or a sponsorship or anything like that on my own yet. And I think that's I'm very grateful because of juggling between, new preps, new classes, and then COVID happened and trying to prep and balance all of those. But I do co-sponsor a horror movies club. And so we sit down, we discuss horror movies that the kids watch, and then, they kind of vote and pick, okay, what movie are you going to watch this weekend? So next week we can talk about this one. And it's just a really fun, SEL moment for them. It's not really anything tied to a certain subject, but more so it's tied to their personal interests and things they like to do.
Awesome. So what are some potential goals that you may have for yourself or even a future classroom to look like, say, within like 3 years? What is somewhere that you want to be within the campus or your classroom?
Yeah, so thinking back on some of the strategies that I like to use, and one of my favorites is that think, pair, share. I would like to have students have a broader question and the think be more like, so right now their think is, oh, I can answer it in one question, like one sentence, and then their share, it's one sentence, and then they kind of combine it. I would like them to get to the point where they can have a moment to think and create, maybe it's explain the process of photosynthesis. And I want them to think through every single step and create it. And I'm envisioning like an entire paragraph, 5 sentences, and then have them share with each other. And I want it not to just be, oh, we combined our 5 sentences. I want them to expand and enrich from that 5 sentences. And now maybe they have 7 sentences. And I want it to turn into a class-long discussion instead of a, oh yeah, we shared our sentence. Oh, you want us to share it again? Okay, we'll share it again. I want it to be like more of a discussion and not a debate, but a conversation that they're having together. And if a think, pair, share now takes about 5 minutes, I want it to take, 10, 15 minutes. It'd be awesome if it could be a whole class. But I think 15 minutes would be a reasonable goal, especially in middle school when, you don't want to talk that long. You're embarrassed or you feel awkward, and 15 minutes should be a good set. And they work on their presentation skills. They work on speaking, writing, critical thinking. It's a very well-rounded goal, I feel like.
I mean, it sounds like it to me. But especially with critical thinking, so that's one of, actually, funny that you mentioned, that's one of our campus goals, is to expand on critical thinking of students. Just like literacy, but stretching it more to critical thinking, making students even to the point of thinking about their thinking. So what is maybe one example, or if you could expand on maybe critical thinking in a classroom environment?
Yeah, and I'm going to pull from that thinking about their thinking and the metacognition that can happen inside a classroom. One of the practices that I do like to initiate is progress trackers. So at the start of the unit, they have a goal. They see where you are now. Okay, currently you know nothing about photosynthesis. You don't even know where energy comes from. And or maybe you do and you're like, oh yeah, that's the sun. Okay, pretty easy, straightforward, not really using any scientific terms yet. And kind of reflecting on, okay, what do you know now? Maybe it's a KWL. What do you want to know? And then at the end, okay, what have you learned throughout this whole unit? And the progress trackers are really great. Start of the week. All right, check in on your progress tracker. Where are you? How do you play? Oh, you're not sure? Maybe I have a quick quiz that they can take, and it's 5 questions, and then it'll say, oh, you know nothing about radiant energy. You don't know what it is, where it comes from, or anything like that. And so then they know, and they can kind of self-evaluate. They saw, oh, I thought I knew, but now I clearly know I don't know, or I kind of know, I'm almost there. And I think that being aware of where they are, what they don't know, helps prepare them for what they do need to know.
Wonderful. So you have definitely gave, our campus a lot to think about and to look through. But I did want to thank you so much for coming today and interviewing with us. And to finish us off, do you have any questions that you have for me or about the school or anything like that?
I've really loved this experience and getting to talk with you guys and learn some more. The only question I would have is kind of the timeline of everything. So I know today we're interviewing. Is it a multi-interview process? Is it we interview and I'll hear back from you? What does it all kind of look like?
So we have to get through all the applicants, that we're required to get through. So I can't give you a firm timeline. I can definitely say that with our applicants and the interviewing process, by the end of the month, I would hope to be able to get back to if we do process it through and go to a next interview or not. And we'll be able to call you with that information,
Okay.
hopefully at least by the end of the month, if not even as soon as 2 weeks.
Okay.
But yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I hope you have a wonderful day.
You as well.